thinking about this when my father lifted me into his truck and said, "The president's been shot, Terry. Everybody's going home." For the next week, we ate supper in the living room, on TV trays, watching the evening news. In those days, my father kept some of his carpenter's tools in a honey-colored wood chest in the kitchen next to the copper boiler. The chest was a perfect cube, 3 feet long by 3 feet wide by 3 feet deep, with little trapdoors and secret compartments and folding shelves. Lift the lid, and you found a crosscut saw and a coping saw fastened by bronzed wing nuts to the other side, a bevel with a mahogany handle in a vertical drawer, a set of flat files lined up by ascending heights. That week, when there was so much sadness and my mother kept crying in front of the TV in her curlers, I daydreamed of being inside my father's tool chest, stretching out my legs against a bronze level, resting my head in the smooth, curved hemlock handle of a block plane. You remember the picture on television that November of John saluting his father's casket? I think that picture was the reason my father began taking me to work with him on the days I wasn't in school. He'd never taken me with him before, and I came to believe that the young president's death had cut him open and that my father's way of coping was to pull me closer to him. Our work mornings began with me pushing a stool from the kitchen table up to the counter so I could turn on the weather radio while my father did his push-ups on the floor. All his life he wore a St. Christopher medallion on a silver chain around his neck, and with each push-up, it clinked against the linoleum. On the way to work, we stopped at Bridie's Hardware in Oak Hill for whatever supplies my father needed. There was a calendar with ladies in bathing suits above the cash register. We would load our supplies into the back of the truck, and it would still be dark when we drove down to the end of the Black Point Road where the town of Ellsworth turned into Rose Point. There was an electric gate my father opened with a key, and beyond the gate, a world you couldn't really believe even when you were there looking at it. A high promontory of open fields and meadows set just back from the ocean, surrounded by giant fir trees, lime-colored bluffs that looked out over a mile-long strand of beach, and 22 cottages hidden along narrow gravel lanes. Designed by the famous Indiana architect Leslie Woodhead and built at the turn of the century by Pennsylvania steel and oil barons, these cottages were mansions, really, sprawling 4-story places stick-framed and cedar-shingled with turrets and gabled roofs and screened sleeping porches that faced the sea. It was one of Maine's private colonies, a summer place that was abandoned to the care of my father during the off-season. He had keys to each house, and the owners employed him to repair the damage done by the fierce storms that battered Rose Point all winter. In a shed beside the 13th green of the golf course, he had a small wood shop where he kept his tools, a 3-horsepower table saw, a planer, miter saw, belt sander, drill press, and in a set of pigeonhole boxes salvaged from the old summer post office when it was remodeled, he kept the keys to each camp under a named slot. This was one rule of Rose Point, that each proprietor name his camp and print this name in discreet black letters on a rectangle oak board that my father spar-varnished every spring and hung from the front porch eaves. North Winds, the Ark, Fair Haven, Kettled Cove. I suppose the idea was that a name on your house could make you feel less temporary about yourself. I went inside all the camps with my father that winter. In Long Rest, there was a photograph of the owners standing beside President Eisenhower. The chandeliers and bronze light fixtures in Homeward came from the Spanish ocean liner Queen Isadora, when she was decommissioned at the turn of the century. On the marble-floored foyer of Last Light, Clark Gable once greeted evening guests. An electronic panel of bells that summoned maids and butlers was still in working order there. In Mainstay, my father once filled all 5 claw-footed bathtubs with bottles of champagne and ice before a party. The backyard of Right Way had been transformed into a fantastic miniature replica of Yankee Stadium, with every detail, including the dugouts and outfield walls, built to scale. For 29 years my father cut the infield grass wearing soft leather slippers and using a push mower whose wheels he had covered with felt. From Memorial Day until Columbus weekend, the lanes at Rose Point were swarming with summer people from far away. Sailing was their main activity, each camp had a boat, and regattas were held 4 times a week. Following an old tradition, the skippers sailed in dark blue double-breasted coats with gold buttons and striped ties. Evening lectures were held in the Stone Library, picnic lunches at the beach house, and book fairs with Punch and Judy puppet shows on the library lawn. After Columbus Day weekend, my father locked up the camps for the long winter. He drained the pipes and shut off the electricity and capped the chimneys. He covered the furniture in white sheets, and then, in the spring, these chores were reversed. Putting the cottages to bed and then waking them up was how my father described this. He preferred the winter, when he had free run of the point and could come and go like a proprietor. When the summer people were there, he was just hired help, and he had to use the servants' entrances and do his work without being seen or heard.